Hi, this is Mark Birch with a quick revision of the second half of Act 2, Scene 3. Having welcomed the Scottish lords Macduff and Lennox into the castle, Lennox tells Macbeth about the strange occurrences of the night. The night's been unruly, chimneys blown down, strange screams of death, the earth was feverish and did shake. So you have this sense of a terrible change in nature, the whole of nature being disturbed, and that really reveals the kind of universal chaos that a Jacobean audience would expect to be brought about by an act of regicide. Regicide undermines the great chain of being. The hierarchy has been disturbed, and therefore universal chaos will be brought about, and that's what Lennox is describing. Having discovered Duncan's murdered body, Macduff cries out, "Most sacrilegious murder have broke ope the Lord's anointed temple," which is an extended metaphor relating to the king as the temple of God on earth. This is an allusion to the divine right of kings, the idea that the king is appointed by God. Therefore, to murder the king is to commit an act of sacrilege. Macduff is essentially reminding the audience of the unholiness of this act that's been committed by Macbeth. The murder's so horrific to Macduff that when he speaks about it, he says, "Approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon." Well, this is a reference to the Gorgons of Greek mythology, the most famous of which is Medusa. The effect, of course, of seeing a Gorgon is to be turned to stone, and the idea is that witnessing the murder of a king like this would be sufficient to petrify, in a literal sense, the person that sees it. It would turn them to stone, it's so horrific. After raising the alarm, Macduff shouts, "Shake off this downish sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself." So once again we've got this motif of sleep, and the link between sleep and death is made apparent once again. It's also worth looking at the way in which sleep is described here. Not only death's counterfeit, a kind of copy of death in the sense that it's a loss of consciousness, but also downy sleep. Well, down is describing the kind of down, duck down, that you would put in pillows. So it's a reference to comfortable sleep, but it's a transferred epithet. It's the pillow that's downy, not sleep itself. So once again, you get this sense of displacement, something being wrong, and there's something terribly wrong about sleep at this point when such horrific occurrences are taking place. We then witness some top dramatic irony when Lady Macbeth enters the scene and asks what's going on. Macduff refers to her as gentle lady. "It is not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell." So Macduff's suggesting that the news of the king's death would be so terrible for a woman to hear that it would kill her. It would murder as it fell upon her. Of course, we know that Lady Macbeth's been instrumental in this death, so rather than kill her, she's the one that's been doing the killing, essentially. The response of Lady Macbeth and Banquo is really interesting. Lady Macbeth's "Woe, alas, what, in our house?" is potentially selfish because she's drawing attention to the setting. This happened in our house. The incredulity seems to be based around the fact that it could happen here, rather than the fact that the king's been murdered. And we know, of course, that Lady Macbeth is trying to put on a particular face to the world to look like the innocent flower, but she doesn't seem to have quite pulled it off here. And Banquo picks up on that. He seems to suggest that she's more concerned with where the murder took place, with her own selfish attitude, her own selfish reputation, than the fact that it took place. He says it's too cruel anywhere. It's the act that's terrible, not where it took place. Macbeth delivers a speech that's full of sadness and regret for the death of Duncan. But unlike Lady Macbeth, it is possible that Shakespeare's presenting genuine feelings of Macbeth, given the nature of the regrets that he showed at the end of Act 2, Scene 2. Of course, it is also possible he's acting just like Lady Macbeth and looking like the innocent flower, but being the serpent under it. The essence of what he's saying is that life's lost meaning with the death of Duncan. Duncan was so noble that life's now as empty as a plaything, a toy, as he puts it. Duncan was, metaphorically, the wine of life that's now been emptied from the vault, or cellar, of the earth, leaving only the dregs, what he describes as the lees, those who lack his qualities. In other words, everyone that's left on earth now is inferior. They are the dregs in comparison to Duncan. Even at this early stage of the play, Shakespeare presents Macduff in opposition to Macbeth. When Macbeth says that he killed the grooms, Macduff says, "Wherefore did you so? Why did you?" questioning Macbeth's motives. Macbeth blames his passion and impetuosity for the killing of the guards. He personifies his violent love as outrunning reason, the thing that would have allowed him to reflect on his actions and forced him to pause rather than just kill the guards. Macbeth seems to be trying to persuade the assembled nobles of the guilt of the guards. And one of the ways in which he does this is through the homophonic pun on breach. So, in one sense, breach, the first sense, is to create a gap, to create a hole. In this case, an enormous hole in the fabric of existence caused by the death of Duncan. He's been such a significant king that his loss has created this huge hole in the fabric of the universe. And then the second meaning of breach, spelt with a double E, is to be clothed, is to kind of wear trousers. And in this case, it's the daggers that are personified as being breached with gore. So by using essentially the same sounding word, breach and breach, Macbeth connects the murder of Duncan with the daggers of the guards, reinforcing the sense of their guilt. Lady Macbeth then pretends to faint. She's demonstrating that she's overcome by this terrible news, looking like the innocent flower. And Macduff calls on the assembled people to help her. Look to the lady. It's interesting that following asides by Malcolm and Donalbain, Banquo says, "Look to the lady," clearly echoing Macduff's earlier request to support Lady Macbeth. So dramatically, it's possible to have no one really responding to Macduff, and yet Banquo's identical command elicits an immediate response, showing the power of Banquo. And of course, this would appeal to James I because he traced his ancestry back to Banquo. Banquo also provides a powerful contrast to Macbeth. Here he's saying, "In the great hand of God I stand." He's standing for righteousness. And that's a direct contrast to Macbeth's inability to say Amen in Act 2, Scene 2, as a result of the regicide excluding him from communion with God. In contrast, Banquo is the representative of God in this regard. The scene ends with Malcolm and Donalbain contemplating what to do next. Donalbain says, "Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles," with this metaphor conveying the idea that there are murderous thoughts from those who pretend to be friends. And of course, this idea of deceit, this theme of duplicity, is echoing Lady Macbeth's "look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." It's an idea that's been used time and time again within the context of the play. He also says, "The near in blood, the nearer bloody," a form of parallelism that reinforces the idea of the connection between danger and relatives. The near in blood are those who are of the same blood, in other words, relatives. And it could be that Macbeth is the nearest relative to Duncan's sons, and so the most likely, in their eyes, to have murderous intent, because he's most likely to be the person that we put forward to be on the throne next, as we see he indeed is. Okay, ta.